thank you to Pastor Keith for joining us tonight on our call. We're doing these digital labs. If this is the first one that you have heard about or seen, you can check out CE National's website. You can check out the Build Momentum website under the digital lab link. We've been doing these for a couple weeks now, and we're just wanting to help offer value content. There's a lot of things on the internet right now, and we wanted to put out some content that was worthwhile to help train and equip both ministry leaders, pastors, students, and tonight we're talking about parents. So Keith, thank you for joining us. You're a parent. You've got, 4 kids?
I do.
What are their ages?
Yeah, I have 4 kids. I have a 14-year-old boy, a 12-year-old girl, and then I have 5-year-old boy-girl twins. So they're keeping us hopping during this season for sure.
Twins. Oh my.
Yeah.
So you're calling it quits now, right? After twins?
I think so.
Question,
yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
There you go. Don't tell Kelly. Yeah.
Yeah.
Keith and his wife Kelly, they're awesome. The people. So Keith is the lead pastor at Grace Fellowship Church in Pickerington, Ohio. We're delighted to have him on tonight to get to chat with him and hear some of the things that God has taught him, not only as a parent, but also in his work with the seniors in their youth ministry. You may have known Keith has 4 campuses now? Is that what you guys have launched? 4 campuses or more?
Yeah, we have 4 campuses, and we were planning to launch our 5th right before this whole pandemic thing happened, and we'll see how that plays out. But yeah, we have 4 campuses.
Nice. Well, God's been doing amazing things in and through their church and their ministry. Keith has been a keynote speaker at Momentum for several years now, and we're just delighted to have him on tonight. So let me just kind of set up some of the goals for our conversation. My name's Eric Miller. If you don't know me, I'm the new Director of Ministry Operations with CE National. I have been a youth pastor in Frederick, Maryland for 15 years, and then I spent my last 1.5 years or 2 years as a small group pastor at the same church in Frederick, and I recently joined the CE National staff. And so it's an honor and a privilege to get to be in this role where we help to train and equip parents. It's tough. It's difficult in the context of not only coronavirus and national pandemic, global pandemic, but even in the context of just normal everyday, how do you have a conversation with your teenager? How do you parent? How do you disciple your students in a tech-heavy, crazy culture that we live in? So tonight we're going to dive into some of that. Our biggest goal here is to help equip parents in the area that we know is challenging anyways, but likely even more so now with all of this craziness going on. So Keith, thank you again. We're going to make use, for those of you who are joining us live on Zoom, we want to make note of the Q&A box at the bottom. There's a chat feature that you can post questions in, but there's also a Q&A box. The Q&A box will be helpful because there's a little thumbs up. If somebody asks a question that you think is of great value and help to you, go ahead and hit that thumbs up button, and it'll move it to the top of the queue where I can see it, and then we can ask Keith, as he is our resident expert tonight. So we're excited. Let's dive in here. Keith, why don't you tell us a little bit about your role as a parent, but also as your connection, because our topic tonight, we're kind of talking about how do you parent seniors or even high school students, but what's your connection with the seniors there at Grace Fellowship?
Yeah, so first of all, thanks for having me, and certainly wouldn't qualify myself as an expert of anything, let alone parenting.
Fair enough.
I feel like I'm figuring it out just like everybody else day in, day out, and my oldest consistently tells me I don't have any idea what I'm doing, and I remind him that I owe him an apology. So I've been the lead pastor at Grace for 15 going on 16 years, and church was really small. As you mentioned, we've grown into multiple campuses. And a number of years ago, I had read something on another church's website about their desire to take some of their best leaders and invest in their young adults of their church, their next generation. And so at the time, I had been leading a small group for just kind of a normal small group, either peers or other adults in the church. But I went to our elders and I said, hey guys, how would you feel about me doing a young adult small group? I did that for a few years. And then came back to them and said, how would you guys feel about doing a small group for seniors in high school? And so started doing that a number of years ago. And then I've taken a year or so off of that, but I've done it for about 5 years. And it's been an incredible experience for my wife and I to invest in seniors. And it's looked differently over the years. And then in some ways it's also looked really similar, but we've invested in those seniors and we've been able to really maintain contact through them, their graduation and then off into college and so on. And there's a laundry list of benefits to that and a laundry list of parenting lessons that I've learned through it. But that's the role that I play. Just recently with this pandemic, our seniors, we weren't able to we do this annual, it's called Black and White Celebration it's a dress up in black and white senior night. And normally I speak at that and we couldn't do that this year. So I recently just gave a talk that was recorded and then passed out to all those seniors as every senior was visited. So those are some of the ways that I stay involved with our student ministry team pretty regularly. And then my wife is a volunteer with our middle school ministry here. So she leads a group. She did lead 8th graders. Now she leads 6th graders. So across the board, we were pretty involved as a couple.
I love it. Now that group that you've worked with seniors, they meet in your house or at the church?
No, we've done it in homes. Sometimes they've met in our house, and then in other times they've met in other people's homes. But in general, they're homes, and that's a part of the group philosophy that we have at the church. So yeah, they meet in homes, and again, they've met in our home sometimes, and other times it's been in other people's homes.
Yeah, I love that. And you and many of your youth leaders have shared at Momentum of some of that model and how that's worked. And I've learned from that, I know, both in small group relationships, but also within our youth ministry. And so it's cool to just hear how God has used that. So not only in your leadership as a pastor, but through those small groups, Keith, I'm sure that you have had relationship with the parents of those students that you're investing in. So tonight, that's I'm sure part of what you're going to draw upon and having a teenager yourself. Why do you think being a parent of a teenager is so difficult in our culture today?
Yeah, I mean, there's some I think historically forever and ever parent challenges of teenagers, and then I think there are some unique challenges in the generation we find ourselves. I think you have the issue of identity, the issue of I want to be my own person and figure out where I am. It belongs to faith, it belongs to my extracurriculars, my friends, all of those things which create challenges. Just like it was when we were in school and everyone's in school, there's enormous peer pressure to fit in. I think some of that peer pressure to fit in and maybe look the part is on steroids due to social media. Anybody who's parenting kids, watching the comparison factor that kids are playing with, that's just a real challenge to navigate how kids compare themselves to other kids. We live in a culture where the idea of truth is certainly debatable and not anything that's absolute or consistent. We live in a world where extracurriculars rule the day, and the god of athletics or band or drama or whatever it is, and none of those things are wrong. My children are involved in those things, but how those dominate our life can take us away from time together. I'm sure most parents could testify to the amount of time they've had for family meals in the last 5 weeks compared to what they have had in a normal given season with what's going on. And so, I think it's all those reasons that come together. I don't know that any of those are fresh, but I definitely think that some of the byproducts of them are pretty unique and substantial.
Yeah, absolutely. I love seeing there's a meme going around the internet right now that's like, a family of 5 before coronavirus, and they're all sitting in the living room in a dark room on their devices, their iPads and phones. And then like now, and they're all like out riding bikes on a beautiful sunny day. It's crazy how something like that God can use to flip everything upside down on its head. And I think that's some of what we're seeing. And also, I think it's going to highlight what parenting was and what parenting might look like in the future. So Keith, I would love even just for you to share, what are some of those themes or areas of concern that maybe you've seen in parenting teenagers, or that you've walked through a theme or an area of concern that you've walked with parents through in recent months?
Yeah, I think something that not just in months, but in the last several years that has really surprised me. I mean, our churches are our campuses are located in fairly affluent, safe, strong areas. And yet, when you look at these students, when we ask them what they're really struggling with, the number of students who struggle with anxiety and depression is incredibly high, incredibly high. And certainly there are contributing factors unique in this time of COVID that are contributing to that. But no COVID before, I think comparison, social media, some of the things that they've been put in front of them from other forms of media have led them to really parenting our level to want to, whether it's define their successes as our successes, push them to be more, the desire for them to be successful. All of those things have created one of my larger concerns, which is kids just feel under pressure. They feel wrapped up, ready to explode. And it's just a challenge to see how many kids are feeling overwhelmed. I'm amazed, even when we ask our middle school students, that one of the things that they say is their level of overwhelmed anxiousness and how their life is put together. And I just think that's something that is super unique to our time in history as parents.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. That's even just the conversations that we've had with CE National, with youth pastors, with students that we have connections with. That is a common theme that we're seeing. And so even next Monday, we're going to be doing a digital lab, and we're putting together a student panel to talk about exactly that, worry and anxiety. So if you anybody's watching this who knows of anybody, students that are wrestling with that, have them check out our digital lab next Monday. But Keith, in addition to that, those concerns are absolutely true. And how do you walk with parents? What does that relationship look like as you walk with parents to help them navigate those concerns with their students?
Yeah, and I'll just add, not only to the anxiety, depression comparison game, but right down to suicide. I mean, we have really successful, strong families where you would think their children would never be thinking about suicide or taking their life, and it's a very normative thing. It's not something that, I think in some ways, in a good way, the taboo nature of talking about that has been taken away, but in a negative way, it's become normalized that so many people do it. I think there's a number of things. I think that parents, first and foremost, have to be honest about where their children really are. I think there's a lot of times parents want to sometimes call their kids Christians when they're not Christians, and be honest about where their kids are spiritually. I think we as parents have to be careful to not internalize our children's state as our failure or as our success, but to project that on them to heap even more, whether it's shame, guilt, or anxiety on them. I think that parents have to be willing to admit when they don't know the answer and go talk to other people and bring things out in the light. I think a lot of parents are afraid to talk about these things. There's an embarrassment factor. There's a we never thought it would be us factor, and parents need to come out and acknowledge those things. Parents need to admit their own failures where they've been pressing too hard. They need to listen to their kids. They need to be involved and attentive to what their children are saying and not dismissive. I think sometimes we can live in a world where the answer is buck up. That would have never happened when I was a kid, or when my grandparents were kids, or my parents were kids. And we can push that on our kids and say, just get over it. That's not the way it is. And I don't think we always listen real well to hear what's going on. There are obviously spiritual things of, are we praying? Are we owning our spiritual responsibility of discipleship? The conversations that we're having, are we looking for teachable moments, while at the same time not trying to over catechize our kids. There's this tension of find the teachable moments and do it without trying to make every single moment a teachable moment. So I think it's a lot of those things of processing those things, again, admitting when you don't know the answer, reading, doing the work. And some of it is just, are we involved? Are we involved in the life of our children to see what's going on? And I think there's a tendency sometimes when our kids can drive or when they're in athletics or whatever they are, that their life becomes in a lot of ways compartmentalized from our life. And we're not able to see them and acknowledge them the way that we should. I think some of the families that I respect the most have done a great job of keeping their teenage children involved in the flow of their life and not just dismiss them into, you can drive, go do your own thing. So those are some things I think that I would comment on.
Yeah. Yeah. So it sounds like not only are parents needing to be honest with themselves, but you're in essence saying with those that they're in community with as well, their small groups or their church friends, and finding that support and encouragement from their peers.
Yeah. And of course, there's a reality that your child doesn't want everything known to everyone, and nor should you want it known. But I think if we're mature Christians, we should be surrounding ourselves with some other mature Christians that we trust. And we should be able to go and seek, whether it's advice or prayer or direction or healthy processing. And then I think also, even when our children do have the guts to tell us how they're feeling, we've got to resist every moment trying to be the corrective moment about that. I think particularly with so many kids struggling or figuring it out with gender issues or same-sex attraction, what I find with a lot of Christian parents is they decide to make every single conversation they have with their kids about that. So, hey, it's a beautiful day outside. Did you notice? Yeah. You want to talk about your attraction issues? Like every single moment they're looking to pivot into that. And I understand the pressure that the parent is feeling, but most of the time, if you're looking to make every conversation about that, you're going to see the child, they're going to become reclusive away from it. They're not going to move into it to talk about it.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's very good. And I love the essence of what you're saying there too, because I think that's such a struggle. I mean, I have a 1 and a 3-year-old, and I can sometimes be even inclined to go that route. And yet it's hard to overcome as a parent. I can only imagine as a parent of teenager, when your student's struggling with something and they do something really boneheaded and you're like, I need some help here. It's embarrassing. It's difficult to overcome that pride or sense of the connection, or feeling like, man, I'm a bad parent and did I screw this up? And so to be able to verbalize that to somebody, to seek help on it or whatever, is so hard. Forgive me, my dog's going crazy here.
No worries.
I love that. I think that's very helpful for parents to understand and think through and wrestle with.
And I think the longer you're a parent and you're trying to figure it out, the more that you end up, particularly if you're in ministry, the more you have empathy for other parents and you have empathy for yourself in the process. There have been times where I've watched my children make mistakes now that I never anticipated they would make, that my last name is attached to. And I think in my younger years as a parent, certainly in my younger years of ministry, it was very easy for me just to say, well, they must be uninvolved, terrible parents. And now that I'm a pretty involved parent, and while I'm not perfect, I feel like I'm engaged. My children have made stupid decisions. My kid's gotten suspended from school. They've gotten detentions. They've not turned in schoolwork. They've gotten in trouble at practices. And I just say that to say that, like, every parent who's really involved is trying, and it doesn't always translate into great results. And at the same time, you got to be honest when you're not trying. I think some of the most perplexing mystery in the Bible sometimes is when I read particularly 1st, 2nd Kings or 1st, 2nd Chronicles, you see these parents, it says, he was the worst king ever and his child was great. And then the next guy was the greatest king ever and his child was an idiot. And you're like, what? There's this responsibility. And so it's weird, but I often tell myself my wife and I talk about, and I tell people in our church, I tell parents, you know, own and control what you can, pray for what you can't. Take responsibility for what you should. Don't take responsibility for what you shouldn't. And so some of that take responsibility is to process and talk about it and get help. But also some of that is to say, it's not my fault that my junior in high school decided to be a moron that night. We laid down the rules and they made the decision. And
yeah. So let's kind of even turn that corner and go into like, there's my part as a parent, right? There's their part as a student, and there's God's part. So all three have to play a role in these students' lives. But what advice would you give to parents who want to help their teens pursue the Lord, but in the midst of this culture that we've been talking about is so difficult?
Yeah, I think, there's some obvious ones. You got to live out your own faith. Nothing will make your child run away more than your own hypocrisy or your own inconsistencies. When I do marital counseling and I ask young people particularly, do you want your marriage to look like your parents? Yes or no? And what parts about it? Sometimes the answers to those are quite sobering. And sometimes that's the kid being the kid, but sometimes it's real. And so I think, are we giving our kids a faith that is attractive, that is real, that is beautiful, that's intimate with God? So, do our kids see us serving? Do our kids see us committed to local church and ownership and serving at our church, attending our church? Do our kids see us living a faith where we admit failure, where we say we're sorry, where we admit that we're wrong, where we ask for forgiveness? Do they hear us pray? Do they hear us be evangelistic? I think all of those things are very, very real. I also think there's an art to that more than a science outside of church involvement and owning your faith, of just putting spiritual things in front of your kids without necessarily telling them why you're doing that. So whether it's you listen to worship music a fair amount when you're driving, whether that's what you have on when you're cleaning up the dishes after dinner, the kind of movies they see you engage or not engage, and how you talk about those things. Do you flip the channel when something comes on? But probably the best way I think I can illustrate it, Eric, is an illustration that I've used in preaching about this. I said, I'm a person that even as a young person, I liked butter pecan ice cream, which I really think of as an older person's ice cream. It's not my favorite, but I will certainly order it and I like it. And the reason I like butter pecan ice cream is because my mom likes butter pecan ice cream and she kept it in the house. And so she kept it around and it was available. And every time she got it out, she didn't necessarily offer it to me, and she didn't force it down my throat. And she didn't say like butter pecan ice cream. And she didn't say, I like it, so you should like it. But what I saw was my mom eat butter pecan. What I saw was that butter pecan was available. What I saw was when we went out to ice cream, my mom got butter pecan a fair amount. And so what I tell people is, keep the butter pecan of the gospel in front of them. Just make it in your house accessible and ready. It doesn't mean every time you do something with it, you try to offer them a scoop per se. And so I think a lot of it is just is it a part of your home regularity? I think all of us, if we're going to be effective at evangelizing anyone, have to do it naturally and not contrived. And I think there's a level of that's just true in the way we influence our kids spiritually. And so when I was ready to try butter pecan ice cream, guess what? It was available. It was in the home. It was present. I knew where to get it. And so I think that illustration makes sense, to sort of the availability of it in front of our homes and just keeping it present.
Yeah, that's really good. That's worth the price of admission tonight. So even though this was free, that was very good. I love that. Yeah. So Keith, even I think in helping our students navigate these the tough, the tricky situations, the circumstances that can consume them so quickly. You were touching even earlier on the idea of idols in our lives and things that can take our attention. And in this context that we've been talking about here of like helping parents encourage and fan the flames of their teenagers to pursue the Lord. What are some things that parents can help students do to set good boundaries, even to identify areas in their students' lives that they need to have good boundaries?
Yeah, I think there's a number of them. One that comes off the bat is with your cell phone. What are the ways that you engage your child with your cell phone? My oldest has a cell phone. He was one of the last few in his class to get one. And that's a real challenge because, they're almost socially a pariah when they don't have it versus every other kid that does. And he really started to feel the weight of that socially, and it was real. And there's a lot of research about that. But when we gave it to him, there was a contract and a whole process that sits inside our cupboard that he had to sign that lays out rules. And I don't care if your child's, 14 or 19, you can have that contract when you own that phone. And that contract can exist in everything from how do they get apps. And obviously you loosen the reins with trust and, age and all those things, maturity. But to where do you keep the phone at night? How will you engage the phone when you're driving? You lay those things out, and there are zillions of examples of those on whether it's you go to Orange's website or Parent Q or any of those things. You can get those for your kids across the ages to look at. And so I think things like contracts for your phone and really working through where that's going to be kept, what's the time, what are the apps, you can't erase your texts, all those kind of things. We have Circle on our phone for our young kids that tracks their hours and all that stuff, which relates to even their video game usages, which cuts down time, all that stuff. I think with athletics, particularly travel athletics, which again, my oldest kids do, I still think there's boundaries that you set with the coaches early on. I think as a Christian, you talk to the coaches and say, hey, this is where my child's boundaries are. This is what my child's going to be involved with. And I'm just going to tell you that up front before you keep them or don't keep them or what you're getting or not getting. And I know sometimes that means your kid won't make the team or it's going to affect playing time. But I think those are real boundaries that you have to step into and figure out. And I'm not even suggesting that a parent should take my boundaries and apply them, but I think those conversations about what those are, so for example, for my son, for his travel soccer, his rule was he got a weekend a season, so fall season and spring season, where he got to miss church entirely. But every other weekend, he was going to get to a church service, whatever that meant. And he was going to be at his student ministry on Sunday nights. And so those are just a rule that we made. And we talked with the coaches about. I think obviously dating rules and what are the rules that you're going to have in terms of how your child's going to date and the boundaries that are associated with that, the boundaries that are associated with the car. What are the rules with the car, the responsibility of what you're paying for, not paying for, how they engage friend circles. Those are some other boundaries, I think. But here's one that I think a lot of families miss with their children, and I wish they would do a better job, which is the conversation around finances. Really helping young people understand how to manage money, how to manage the idea of generosity. I think there's a lot of parents that are really intentional that say, hey, if you were going to go to a Momentum or a Kalahari, you're going to pay for some of that, or you're going to do whatever. But I think, how do we teach our kids to give? How do we teach our kids to be a part of investing in the church? And so since my oldest two have been little, they've had these 3 jars in their room, give, save, spend. And we sort of try to teach them the 10-10-80 rule. And we're not, maniacal about it, but we try to make sure they're keeping that stuff in their jars with the way that it goes. And I think, again, there's boundaries to how that plays out with money and how that looks and those kind of things. So those would be several examples I think are important.
Yeah. So bottom line, it sounds like what I'm hearing you say is like, these are all boundaries that you as a parent are helping instill in your student, in your child, teenager, because they're boundaries that you've seen are needed. You're coming alongside of them to help them figure out those boundaries because you can see into the future. Hey, we're going to give you this smartphone, but it's like a dangerous thing. So there are going to be boundaries that we're going to help you figure out. And so I think that's a bold statement for some parents, maybe that are listening. They're sitting there thinking like, I wouldn't do that. But I also, Keith, correct me if I'm wrong. I think what I'm hearing you say is that those are boundaries that you as the parent are praying through. You're seeking the Lord. You've learned valuable lessons, even maybe in your own life, that now you can walk alongside your teens and help shepherd them in that way. Is that accurate?
Yeah, for sure. And I think that, part of our job as parents is to lead and to create godly adults, not well-behaved people. And to create godly adults, you have to not only, I think, Eric, a lot of parents, and it's a challenge because to lead this way is exhausting. You have to think, you have to do the research, you have to find stuff. You can't be disconnected. You have to confront, you have to discipline, you have to punish, you have to encourage. You can't just check out on those things. But I think a lot of parents are Christian parents, well-intentioned Christian parents, involved Christian parents. I think they're oftentimes really good at teaching their children what the Bible says. But I think there's a difference between teaching their children what the Bible says and teaching your child the wisdom discipleship principle of how to live that out with what the Bible says. So to give an example, like there's a difference between saying Christians should give to their church, Christians should tithe. Well, that's not the thing that I really want my child to understand. I want my child to understand generosity. I want my child to understand eternal investment. I want my child to understand having finances in a way where I can help people that are in need. And so there's a difference between creating systems and boundaries that are simply to legislate the law or to protect them from themselves, which is part of it. But some of it is I'm creating these boundaries to teach you wisdom of the discipleship reality, and that I understand that a car or a phone is a weapon. They're dangerous and they need to be handled like electricity. They need to be handled properly. And then from my own experience as a pastor, as my own experience as a personal Christian, you just know the things, everyone thinks their story is unique. And while we are all individually made in the image of God, and we're all unique, we're not normally that unique. Most of our stories are the same. Most of the potholes that people hit in life are the same. I can look at a young person in our student ministry and often predict with a pretty good level of accuracy what their time in college and young adult years are going to look like. It's not rocket science. I can look at their family. I can look at their involvement. I can look at their decision-making process. I can look at the boundaries. And within a pretty good number, I can go, that kid's going to have a really great God-honoring, missional time in college. That kid's going to end up in the party scene. And a lot of that is, have parents done the work to not just teach the Bible, so to speak, which not even some parents do that, but to teach discipleship, to teach wisdom, to teach thinking. And again, that's hard. That's exhausting.
Yeah. Yeah. I want to pull out that one piece you mentioned too. It's as if you were using the comparison of like electricity. It's something that's dangerous, but it's helping our teens understand the privilege that something is that we get to have versus the consequences that breaking that privilege are going to inflict on our lives. And then coming into agreement with them in godly fashion and helping them understand biblical principles that they can then navigate through those circumstances. I love that.
Yeah. And I think, in my time with seniors, one of the things that I've really seen is I think sometimes we underestimate that a high school student really wants to understand the heart of the command in a way that they can get God's goodness connected to it rather than just the command itself. But to teach that way and to show people that the boundaries that God sets upon your life are good. They're wonderful. They are for your best interest. They're for human flourishing. They're for the goodness of other people. And to do that is a step that, whether it's in our preaching, our teaching, our discipling, that is beyond simply saying, what does the chapter and verse say? I often tell our preachers here at Grace that there's a set of questions that I always ask whenever I'm teaching a text. One of the first questions is, what would I want my non-Christian brother-in-law to know about it? And that helps me get to what the Bible says. But the second question I ask is, what would I want my son to understand about that biblical principle? And really what that really helps me do is to flesh out, what's the discipleship nugget that I'm trying to teach the church or the person about it? How do I help them go further with that? And I think that's part of the parenting process, is to be willing to do that work. I think in some ways it's easier to send our kids to their room and tell them to go read the book of James than it is to actually explain to them, why is it God would say, don't do something? And that's a tougher conversation to have.
Yeah. Yeah. It's the difference between wanting to be like their buddy or their friend, and being a parent that's a spiritual authority and discipling them and shepherding them into a relationship with Jesus. Yeah. So Keith, in working with seniors, and realizing, like, through this whole coronavirus and the season that we're in and everybody's trying to navigate, we know these students they're dealing with, you said it already, with anxiety and fear, even signs of depression. But what advice or challenge, encouragement would you give to parents who have students who are struggling with great loss or anxiety in the midst of all of this?
Yeah, there's several things. I mean, we've been trying to navigate this not just with our students, but ourselves as a staff and our own families. I think first and foremost, as a parent, every counselor, pastor, clinical psychologist would say you have to be taking care of yourself. There's just a level of self-care that you personally have to have, because to be able to pour out and give back, you have to first be healthy. And so are you taking care of yourself? Are you, really basic things, feeding your soul spiritually, but are you eating okay, getting out, working out, seeing the outside, getting sleep, all those things. And I think it's harder to parent in this detour when you yourself are just spent. So how do you figure out how to take care of yourself? I think parents have to teach their children and walk through the concept of lament and loss, and to stop dismissing things that are significant to those children about what they've lost, to really understand it, not from a idolatry perspective, but I'm a 41-year-old grown man. Prom isn't a big deal to me, but it is a big deal to that young girl or that young man. And to be able to empathize and come alongside, to walk them through the process of identifying, saying out loud, this is what you lost. How do you feel? The Lord will be my portion. I walked my staff through Lamentations 3:19 through 24, and we talked about this idea of admitting, I don't like what I'm losing. I don't like what I'm feeling. I don't like what I'm dealing with. My oldest and I, in this process, were supposed to go a few weeks ago on a mission trip together to Guatemala, and we lost that trip. And then he was supposed to go on his school trip to DC, and he lost that trip. And he lost his spring soccer season and spring basketball season, and my daughter lost her spring tennis season, and we lost a family cruise. And in all of that, it is unpacking those things, lamenting those things, saying that they're real, asking them, how are you doing, checking in on their heart. Then I think it is us as parents, and this is hard, man. This is hard with homeschooling and figuring out how to, teach our kids when we're not teachers during the season. It's difficult, but I think we've got to be willing to do the work to not let our kids be idle, to teach them the value of stepping into, whether it's owning more things around the house or working on their craft of what they love and are disciplined to. Kids, I don't care whether you're 14 or 19, you can be prone to play Apex or video games forever on end. And to be honest, parents don't mind it because you're out of their hair. And but it's a fight. And how do you work through that? How do you have this discipline to say, no, honey, no, son, you're going to get out. You're going to go for a walk. You're going to go for a run. You're going to cut the grass. You're going to do these things. And so I think it's on us to not let them be idle. It's on us to make sure they're finding a healthy, appropriate ways to stay involved in their churches. However our churches are doing it, whether it's a Zoom call for their small group or watching a service or whatever it is. I think we got to do those things. I also think during this season, man, the ball of discipleship has been clearly put back in the hands of the parents, which is where it always should have been anyways. And so we just have to own that. We can't bail ourselves out and say, well, the church will take care of it. The church can't take care of it the way that it would love to help with. It's in our court. So we've got to own those things. And then we also have to be empathetic to our kids, not just in their lament, but in their confusion, in their frustration, in their boredom. We have to acknowledge it. I mean, it is not normal what any of us are dealing with. And we just got to say it, and we got to acknowledge it and process that. And then I also think we got to work hard to find the wins that we can have as a family, whether it's the simple games around the dinner table, or yes, I'm going to give you extra time to stay up tonight, or however we can do that to win. And but it's hard, and it is what's coming tomorrow is tomorrow, and it's in front of you, and it's tough. But those are some things that I think about right now that are important.
Yeah, that's really good. Well, I want to open it up to our viewers and people who are joining us here in the webinar. If there's any questions, we're running out of time here. If anybody's got any questions, feel free to drop those in the chat box. Keith, I know some that we had gotten even via email today that we can kind of talk through. Just what are some questions that you can ask your teenagers to hopefully open up some good discussion and dialogue with them?
Yeah, I think one of the questions that I have found with teenagers that are pretty against God or distant from God or not involved with churches, two different questions. One is, who do they look up to and why? To really ask them, who do you say, I want to be like them? What inspires them? What is it that they're after? And I think that gives you a little bit of the window into their soul for what moves them. And I think almost always there's a clear gospel connection to that, and a clear biblical truth connection to that you can get after. The second thing I think it's related but maybe a little bit different is to ask them what really motivates them. What do they enjoy? What do they love? What sets their heart on fire? And again, oftentimes there's a real connection biblically to that. If they're a creative, well, God's a creator, and you don't just drop that connection right away, but you can see that. If they're mechanical, you can see that, and you can get after that. If there's someone that says, I respect people who pursue justice, you can go after that and understand that. And so I think sometimes asking those two questions give you a chance to get a real picture of where the person is. And then if there's someone that's been churched a long time and it, and they've been tuned out, I think you just give yourself permission to say, you know what, no judgment. What is it you hate about church? What is it that you resist about God? And really go after that. And sometimes if that's where your kid is, you got to have that. I also think that sometimes one of the most underestimated things with our own children is the power of getting other adults around them that they respect, that they're not threatened by. I think there is tremendous power, whether it's other godly coaches, other godly youth leaders, parents of friends that can speak into their life, and then navigating that. And so, going to that young man and saying, would you take my student out? I had, when my son turned 13, almost a couple years ago now, I had 10 different men that he respected, and I knew he respected, write him letters. And they were from different walks of life. And I asked them, I gave them, I want you to say some things you value about Caden and some advice that you give Caden. And then Caden read those, and he kept those, and it was part of a rite of kind of a rite of passage event. But I think again, that body blow of other people saying the things that you're saying. I'm amazed sometimes how Caden's coaches will say the same thing that I say to him, but I'm his dad and they're his coaches. And so he hears it, right? And so the same thing's true spiritually. I think bringing around other people in your home can really be huge. So those are some things, those are some questions and thoughts to that.
That's awesome. Yeah, I think part of it is being purposeful and prayerful and thinking ahead, like knowing, hey, we're going to watch church online this morning, and we know, Pastor Keith is going to share some really good principles from Scripture, and so being purposeful to think through what are some questions that I'm going to think of ahead of time, that at the end of watching the service we can ask our students and hopefully engage in a conversation. It's kind of like that idea of when you go see a movie, you have a common experience that you can talk about and process through. So that's awesome.
Yeah, and I think sometimes too, as parents, in marriage, there's this reality that every time you want to talk about something, it isn't necessarily the right time to talk about something. That there's a time to go have a difficult or conversation or press something. I think sometimes as parents, we pretend that that's not real because we're the parent and we can just muscle up and say, you're going to have the conversation because I said so. But the truth is that's just foolish. That's poor. And I think there are times where, where I've gotten myself into trouble with adults, with my wife, with my kids, and with other kids, is I've demanded a conversation in a moment that would have been way better had it been at a different time. And being willing to recognize that that person isn't ready to have that conversation in that moment, or it's not great, and be okay with that, and realize that we'll still get to it. To make the mental note, to take the note in my cell phone to say later on, I need to circle back to that. Sometimes in a group with the seniors, a student says something that is very telling, but it's not the moment to go back at them about that conversation in that moment in the group. But you got to do the thing to make the note to be able to go back and have the conversation to follow up with it. And it's like preaching, illustrations. I often believe that it isn't that people sometimes lack for creativity. I think sometimes they lack for cataloging. They don't have a great system for how to record their creativity. And I think the same thing's true in these conversations. How do you grab a hold of the right time to have those talks?
Yeah, that's really good. Being patient, trust in the Lord in that. Keith, one other question that we have here, just what's a passage of Scripture that you've used with either your own kids or students that you're investing in that is just meaningful? It's kind of a significant passage that you use with helping to encourage your students.
Yeah, I'll go through three really fast. One very obvious, Romans 12, 1 and 2. I think the idea of, in light of God's mercy, so making sure we elevate that whatever we're talking about in followers of Jesus is in light of what Jesus has done. And then the idea of what does it mean to live a life of a Christian that's a life of worship in all ways, and don't conform, but to transform. Every person wants to know the wise thing to do, but the wise thing to do begins with knowing Jesus, and then it begins with not conforming, but transforming. And then you know what to do. So that, I think a second one is Genesis chapter 12, where God comes to Abram and he calls him and he says, I want you to step out. And I walk students every year at the beginning of the year through this. What does this verse ask? Well, it asks him to leave all of these comfortable, familiar things. And he says, to go where? And he says, to a place that I'll tell you later. He doesn't even tell him where. And yet in verse 5, it says, but Abram went, or Abram left. And I often ask the students and other adults, could you have put your name in that? Could it say, so Keith left, so Eric left, in light of whatever it is that God called you to, whatever your faith is? And then another place that I go to is in Ecclesiastes. The last few verses I think are so powerful, where you have the teacher, Koheleth, Solomon saying, I've looked at everything. I've evaluated everything. I've had everything you think you want. But in conclusion, here's the deal. Fear God, keep his commandments. This is the chief duty of man. And in the end, you're going to be judged for it. And before that, at the beginning of the chapter, he says, remember your creator in the days of your youth before trouble comes. And so I think connecting those together to say, in the end, you're going to want to fear God and keep his commandments. And the sooner you get that, the more you're going to live a life where you don't sabotage it yourself. It's not going to be easy. It's not going to be perfect, but you can take a lot of the self-inflicted wounds off of the table by fearing God and keeping his commandments. And so I think those three sets of scriptures have some real scaffolding framework with different perspective to help people navigate their faith.
Oh, that's great. That's powerful. Thank you for sharing that.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we're about out of time tonight, and we do hope that this is a valuable resource for you as parents. We at CE National, we want to help train and equip you to live on mission, to love and lead like Jesus. And so this is a part of that. If you found this helpful, those of you who are joining us live at the end of this, you're going to have a brief survey that we'd love for you to fill out and just give us some feedback. If there are other topics that you think that we might be able to do a digital lab on that would be of worth for you, please send us a memo or an email and let us know about that. Thank you, Keith, for joining us and being a tremendous resource for us tonight. We also, you mentioned earlier, just some of the phenomenal resources that are out on the internet that are all Christian based on tips and tricks to navigating these spiritual conversations with your students. One of the best ones, one of my favorites, we've partnered with Momentum with Axis at www.axis.org. We'll put a link here in the chat. There's I just saw they're doing a webinar on parenting and how do you engage in conversation. That's coming up that you can register for. It's axis.org/art of conversation. And even on the Axis page, they have some of my favorite parent resources that are amazing resources that even talk through how do you have boundaries in navigating cell phones and technology and dating, all that kind of stuff. So there's tons of stuff out there that you can find, but those are some good ones. So thank you, Keith, for being a part of this. Parents, if you're watching this on Facebook or you see this video pop up on YouTube and you found this helpful, we would encourage you to share it with other parents, share it with people in your community, because we believe that God has a purpose and a plan for you as a parent to disciple your students to live and love like Jesus. So thank you, Keith, for sharing your heart tonight. Would you just pray us
Thanks
out?
for having
Pray for
me.
our parents. Yeah.
Yeah, be happy to. Lord Jesus, we thank you that in the end, you're the one who draws and changes and transforms. You're the one who has the power to move a heart, and your spirit is the one that brings life. And so we're just confident in trusting you and your goodness. But at the same time, God, as parents, give us the discipline, the courage, the maturity to step into the role that we do play. Help us to lean first into you and to have healthy relationships with you so that those can overflow into the relationships with our kids. Keep our marriages strong. Show our children strong marriages as we lead from a place of togetherness in our home. And God, we just thank you that you're with us every single step of this process. And we're just going to count on your wisdom. You promise us that if we need it, we can ask and you'll give it. So we pray all this in the name of Christ. Amen.
Amen. Hey, thanks so much, Keith, for joining us. Thank you all for following along with Zoom and join us on Facebook Live. We'll see you next time. Thanks, Keith.